For demo purpose, I created one module named as transaction IAPI. Basically, it's a producer module. We will expose all our API from this module. So first, take a look on custom authentication with key value pair. For that, I created this transactions endpoints. I created one method named as get transaction. I set up this API authentication as custom. So when you set here custom, it will give you on authentication actions. It means before calling this action on the API, we have to validate some logic. And in our case, definitely before going to access the data, we want to perform some validation using the key value pair that is coming in API header. So that purpose we created this as a custom authentication. Here you can see I added header name as authx app id. This is my name. I can uh, make it anything here, but we need to use the same header name when we are calling this API. So this I am using, and it's a method of inbuilt HTTP request handler extensions. So this is an inbuilt extension. We have we have one method over here, get request header. It will give the value of header from the key, means this header name. So basically the idea is we will pass two values in our API as a header and will validate both the values. So here you see I am getting first of all header value using this header name. Then I will take another header value using this header name, and then I am passing both the values whatever is coming from the API to this action called name validate header. In validate header, we'll check whether these two values those are coming from API is valid or not. Here you see I'm using to site properties, app ID and secret key. App ID basically here we are having any value, but we have to ensure this value will be passed when any consumer calling our API. So that's why I'm using this app ID, this value, and then for secret key I'm using this. We can put anything, but we have to make sure whenever we are calling this API, we will pass the exact same value in both the key. So here in our method, we are checking if the passing value from the consumer, which is app ID and secret key, is equal to our site properties app ID and secret key. If that's the case, then what we can do next will allow them to call our method, because after that our control will come in get transaction method and will allow consumer to access this data. And if the case is it's not valid, then we are raising exception, we are giving some messages, or we can provide some error code also to the consumer. So based on that error code, consumer can give some proper message to the end user. So we can use anything in case of failure this validation. So this is important. Whenever any request will come, on authentication will execute, and it will get the data from the header from the request. Then we'll validate that header, and if that is valid, then we'll allow them to access the data. Basically it is not anything, we are only providing the data. I'm checking simply account number which is exists in my request. This is my request. In request body I am expecting one account number to be passed. So this is the account number. Based on the account number, I am providing transaction list. This is my structure. You see, I am using list of transaction. So based on this account number, I will provide list of transaction. And this is just we can say the flag whether our REST call is success or failure. So if my account number is valid, then I am fetching data based on the account number, and then I'm checking whether it is empty or not. If not empty, then I am returning all the transactions for this particular account number. So this is on expose side. We are validating and then we are providing data for the consumer. Now let's move on to consumer side. Consumer basically where our application will interact and will call our API. So this is another module, transaction IS module. I created one math. I consume this API in my transaction IS module. You can see here this is the API which I created in my provider module. That is provider module. I am consuming here. I can pass this request and response. One important thing, how I can make sure these values are correct or not. So OutSystem provide one good things over here. When you are exposing any API and you have to consume them, let's open the structure of the that particular API. So we can right click and we can hit this icon, open documentation. What it will do, it will explain everything for this particular API. So it will be easy for us while we are consuming this API, we will use the same structure. So then there is less chances of error, mismatching the structure, mismatching the type of uh, data type of the structure, some kind of things we are avoiding. So better once we expose the API, we'll open this documentation. Once we open this, it will show all the method of this API, the URL, request body, what is request body, and what is response. So what we can do, we will just simply copy this and we'll come in our consumer module and we'll paste here. Right, we'll select the method, whatever method name we are providing, HTTP method name, post or get, we will select here. Based on this documentation, we will copy this structure simply and we'll put here in request and then response, and then we'll hit on finish button. Once we hit this button, OutSystem automatically map all the structures. I will show you. These are my structures out system created automatically when I hit finish button. Okay, everything will be mapped, so we no need to worry about anything on this. Okay, so I hit finish button. Now my structure already created. Now the next thing is to set up this API. We have on before request, because why we need this, because if you remember, in our API expose method we are expecting some headers in the request. These headers value we are expecting, so that's why we need to set up these values while we are consuming this API. So we are consuming this API, then we will have this option on before request. We need to select this. By default it is not selected. We need to select, and it will open one actions here. On before request means whenever this request will initiate, before that we can perform some our custom logic here. So when you open it, it will give you one parameter by default, request and customize request. This will not come. This I added as a local variable. This is also a inbuilt structures HTTP header which is have only name and value. So here I am going to create the key, app ID and the value. And the second assignment, I am again using some other key and that value. Here when in expose API we added a logic. We are expecting from the consumer two key and its values, this key and this secret key, right? That's why we are adding over here. We can use single also, but for demo purpose I use two. Okay, so I am adding here header name exact, it should exact same with our expose API header name. This should match, otherwise we'll receive some error. So here I am adding app ID, then I am setting consumer app ID. Now this is again important because we need to provide the key along with the value. So what will be the value? The value we are setting here because we know our producer given us the value. This value you can use whenever you are interacting with me, like this value. So we know this is the value of app ID, and this is the value we need to pass for secret key. So this is given by our API provider, in our case which is transaction I API, right? So we will use the same key, app ID and secret key. We'll hit here, we'll set first header value, then we'll append request header. What is this request header? Basically when you create this actions on before request, out system will create on before request. It will give us this structure. By default it is having base URL, so many parameters we have, right? But we are only concerned right now about headers. It's a list of headers, means we can append multiple values as an header of this request, and this is what we need, right? So we are going to create one header, then we are appending this request header with our HTTP header. Then again I'm doing the same thing because we need a two key and its values. So I'm again preparing one more header name and then value, and then appending with the request header. After that, whatever request is prepared, I am assigning to customize request, means after executing this request, customize request should have my list of HTTP request header along with the values, and this is what we need to call a API. The next thing, this will execute before calling any of the method. In the next step, once we set up this, it will call this particular method along with our created HTTP header. And in that way, our header will come, value will come, will validate, as I already told you, will validate header. If everything goes well, then we'll allow them to access our data. In our case, that is a transaction based on the account number, else we will raise some exception. Okay, now we'll see the demo how it will work. So I created this consumer module transaction IS, then I added one core module, and this is my front end applications. Let me run this. This is my screen. Basically, I added one text box here. I will manually enter my account number and will hit transaction get transaction button, and it should list out all the transaction with this particular account number. So let me run this application. We'll see how it will work. Okay, so this is my screen is loaded. Here I need to enter one account number. I already added some dummy data in my entity, so I am passing that account number and then hitting my button. Let me show you. Let me move on to Chrome. Okay, this is my page I opened in Chrome because I want to show you the call from the network log. Here I am entering account number. Okay, I am hitting get transaction button. This request is going. We'll see the status. It's still pending. Maybe my system is slow, not sure. Okay, it took much time. No, it should not be the case. Let me open again, not sure why. I didn't added any debugger, I am sure. Yes. See, not sure what happened that time, but result should come immediately. See, different result is coming. Okay. Within 1 second request completed. Okay. So this is returning our data, and this is how our value is returning from the API. So this is the mechanism like a key and value pair, we can say. It is returning the value. Now we will move to another approach to secure our API, that is called dynamic token. The difference between this approach and the dynamic token approach is that here we are setting, if you noticed, here we are setting one app ID and secret key, and we are passing this value to our producer module. So it remains same. This remains same, right? Whenever anything is changing here, they will update to the consumer. You can update your app ID and secret key and send again to updated app ID and secret key. But in dynamic token approach, it will work a little bit differently. Let me show you. For that particular things, we need to set up first of all clients. Means we will give them some screens for the clients to set up their client ID and secret key, and based on the client ID and secret key will generate dynamic token, and that dynamic token will pass to our producer. So as we can say, so as a validation side, we need to use token always. Let me show you. I created this module token provider. Some screen I created to set up client credential and client secret key. Let me show you. So this is the first step while we are dealing with the dynamic token mechanism. Let me run this page. Will show you what we are going to set up here. Okay, this is my page. Whenever any new client will come, we'll ask them to register here to generate their client ID and secret key. I already created one row here. So this is the screens. We will put some name here, and then this client ID will come automatically, and this client secret will generate. We are generating both the values from the system using some methods. Okay, so once user will save this, we are saying to the user, to this particular client, keep a note of this client ID and secret key, because we need this while we are providing them dynamic token. So we have to make a note of this client ID and secret key. I already created one entry. I will show you. This is my client ID for this client as a test. So these are the values. I just copy and paste it somewhere so that I can use while I am consuming REST API. Okay, so let's suppose I set up this page, then I will go my provider module. I created actually two API, we can say. First one to generate the token, and second one actually to provide the data. So for that I created one API, that is get access token. It will be used to provide dynamic token, and then we are consuming again one more API that is called get transactions. The this is just the same values they will provide, but our authentication mechanism will be different. So I just wanted to show the differences, how that is differ, because we want the same data to be accessed, like by account number we want some transaction list, but the authentication mechanism is different, that I will show you. So this is our basically two API we have. Generate token will provide the token, and then get transaction will get the transaction data. I created I actually expose one API first of all here. This on before request. I consume one API. This is my dynamic token API, that is transaction OAuth API. I consume here. This API I consume here, and as I told you, the same things I am using here. On before request means before requesting any API we need to generate some header, right? So now see the difference, how we are going to use this dynamic token approach. Here we are passing site.client id, site.client secret, right? This is hard coding, we can remove also this, not an issue. Only concern about client id and secret key, and this client id and secret key will be our this client id and secret key that we created from back office for a client, right? So we are saying to the consumer, whenever you need a token, pass us the client ID and client secret. We are saying to the consumer, then only we will give you token. So this is the get access token API I created, but before that we need to prepare, yes, we need to create this value, this variable, so that we can call the API. Token request client ID I am setting from site property, token ID client secret I am setting from the site properties. Then I am calling get access token API. If you see the path, the same API which I have here. Here you notice I'm not using any kind of validations, because I already got this client ID and secret key, and then providing some token. So while accessing actual method, that time I am validating the key, but not on calling the API, just like that this one, right? So here when control will come, it will not check anything here because I am not using anything. Here I will check, give me this client ID secret key, that is only I am worry right now. So I need this client ID and secret key. If that is valid, then I will call this method request access token, get access token. Here I will validate whether my client ID and secret key is valid or not. So using this entity, I'm checking whatever the client ID and secret key I'm passing from the consumer, it is valid or not. If it is valid, I'm returning some values, and then I'm generating one token. This is, if everything is valid, then here I am going for the exceptions is if it is not valid. If it is valid, control will come here, it will generate a token. Using this method, I am generating, these are some settings for the token. I am generating some token, generating some refresh token, and I am using one entity, that is a create token entity. Create token entity will hold the data which is created just now, like auth for which client we created, access token. These are some additional things we can use, but I'm not going to explain as of now these, because these are, as I told you, expiration, scope, refresh token. These are also other kind of things we can do. So OAuth, client ID and access token, that we are only concerned about, because we need an access token so that we can access our API. So it will return us a access token. So this access token will return based on my this service call. Okay. Then the same way I will create a header, request header as a token, and I will pass this token which is generated just now to as a request header value, and then will pass to this API. Yes, this is my API. I already prepare everything. Now I'm calling this API. Let's check this code. This is important. Here I am checking. See, here I am checking the same key. Give me the token key with this request. They will provide me the token, and then I am applying some logic here. I am actually validating that token is valid or not, or in scope we can access, or the client ID we can apply some more filter. But let's simply check here the token which is coming from the consumer is active token on my entity. Okay, so I am validating that token. If that is valid, this is hash, we are validating our token, validate token, right? If that token is valid, then we are going to access the data, that is our get transaction. If it is not valid, then we are giving some exception message or some code to the consumer. Okay, so this is how this dynamic token things will work. Now we'll see demo application. To understand that dynamic token, I created another screen with the same UI look and feel, but it will call dynamic token approach using the authentication in REST. So I will browse this screen. This is my previous cloud dynamic token. What is my dynamic token screen? We'll see here how our call will go. Let me enter the account number. Let me show you the network log also. Okay, so these values are coming, but that is coming from my dynamic token approach, right? Here I am calling that method. Let me show you again. Same method I am using, yeah, but the data is coming from dynamic token approach. So the conclusion is there are two major things we can say in whatever the approach we discuss. One is key value pair and another one dynamic token approach. We have more control, more security in dynamic token approach because we are generating runtime that access token, and in that access token we can provide some additional filter, we can say, like expiration date, how much time that token will expire. We have a refresh token concept also, and then we can set scope also. So whatever means, as a security we can enhance anything for that. But one more most important thing is that always it will be on runtime, so there is a less chances of tampering your data. That's why it is most convenient as of now to use that dynamic token approach. Hope you can understand how it will work and what are the difference we have whatever we discuss. Thank you so much.